boy feared public speaking. His name was Ethan, and the very thought of standing before a crowd sent a chilling wave of panic through his entire body. It wasn't just a simple case of nerves. It was a profound, paralyzing dread that felt like a physical weight pressing down on his chest. His heart would start to pound like a frantic drum. His palms would become slick with cold sweat, and his mind, once clear and focused, would dissolve into a chaotic fog. Words, which came so easily in quiet conversations, would abandon him, leaving a gaping void where coherent thoughts used to be. The fear was a living entity, a shadowy monster that whispered insidious doubts into his ear. "You're going to forget your lines. They're all going to laugh at you. You'll make a fool of yourself, and everyone will remember it forever." This fear had deep roots, tangled in the soil of a few embarrassing childhood moments. A forgotten line in a school play, a stuttered presentation in middle school. These small stumbles had grown in his memory, morphing into monumental failures that defined his perception of himself. Consequently, Ethan built his life around avoiding the spotlight. He would choose group projects where he could handle the research but let someone else do the talking. He would sit at the back of classrooms, hoping the professor's gaze would pass over him. He would formulate brilliant ideas at work, but keep them locked away, fearing the moment he might be asked to present them. His world had shrunk, its boundaries defined by the terrifying prospect of public attention. This fear wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a K, and he was both the prisoner and the jailer, unknowingly limiting his own potential and silencing his own voice before anyone else had the chance. The silence was safe, but it was also suffocatingly lonely. Practice slowly replaced fear with confidence. It began not with a grand gesture, but with a small, almost imperceptible decision. One evening, after turning down yet another opportunity to share his thoughts, at a team meeting, Ethan felt a sharp sting of regret. He was tired of being a spectator in his own life. That night, he didn't sign up for a high-stakes speaking engagement. Instead, he stood in front of his bedroom mirror and simply spoke. He started by reading a passage from a book aloud, just to get used to the sound of his own voice filling a space. His voice trembled at first, a fragile thread of sound in the quiet room. But he did it again the next day, and the day after that. This simple, private act was the first step on a long, deliberate journey. He then graduated to recording himself on his phone, cringing at the playback, but forcing himself to listen, to identify the nervous tics, the ohms and ahs that punctuated his sentences. He started small, focusing on one manageable goal at a time. The first goal was to maintain eye contact with his own reflection for a full minute. The next was to speak for 2 minutes without filler words. Each tiny victory, invisible to the outside world, was a crucial building block for his nascent confidence. He then joined a local public speaking club, a decision that terrified him more than anything he had ever done. Walking into that first meeting felt like walking into a lion's den. His hands shook as he held the agenda, his throat dry. But the environment was not what his fear had promised. It was a room full of people just like him, each battling their own version of the same monster. They weren't there to judge. They were there to support. His first table topic, an impromptu 1-minute speech, was a disaster in his mind. He rambled, his voice quivered, and he was sure he had made no sense. But afterward, people didn't laugh. They clapped. They offered gentle, constructive feedback. One person praised his courage for getting up there. Another complimented a single phrase he used. This feedback was a revelation. He realized that the audience wasn't his enemy. They were collaborators in his growth. Week after week, Ethan returned. He prepared short speeches, meticulously outlining his points and rehearsing them endlessly. He practiced in his car during his commute, into shower, and while walking his dog. He visualized success, imagining himself speaking clearly and calmly, a stark contrast to the catastrophic scenarios that used to dominate his thoughts. The practice was a slow, arduous process of desensitization. Each speech, each moment at the lectern, was an exposure therapy session. The pounding heart was still there, but it was no longer a signal of impending doom. It was just a physical sensation, a sign that he was doing something important, something challenging. The sweaty palms became a familiar precursor to action, not paralysis. The mental fog began to lift, replaced by a growing clarity as he learned to trust his preparation. He discovered techniques to manage his anxiety, deep breathing exercises before he was called up, grounding himself by feeling his feet firm on the floor, and finding a few friendly faces in the audience to focus on. He was no longer just a boy who feared public speaking. He was a person actively learning the craft of communication. The transformation was not a sudden, dramatic event, but a gradual, quiet, confidence wasn't a destination he arrived at. It was a path he was paving, one small, practiced step at a time. He started to volunteer for small presentations at work, first to his immediate team of 3, then to a slightly larger group. The old fear still whispered, but now there was a new, stronger voice, the voice of practice, the voice of experience that whispered back, "You've done this before. You are prepared. You can do this." The fear hadn't vanished entirely, but it had changed. It was no longer a paralyzing monster, but a manageable flicker of energy, a surge of adrenaline that he could channel into his performance, giving his words passion and dynamism. His colleagues began to notice the change. They saw a man who spoke with conviction, who could articulate complex ideas with clarity, and who was no longer afraid to hold the floor. The cage he had built around himself had not been shattered in a single blow, but rather, its bars had been patiently, persistently filed away through the repetitive, powerful friction of practice. The silence that once defined him had been filled with the steady, resonant sound of his own hard-won voice. Courage grows through action.